Hello, everybody, and welcome to Gamer Weekly. With me today is Howard from Muse Games. Thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, you guys are currently working on a game called Embr. Can you tell me a little bit about that game?
Sure. It's basically co-op firefighting, except that you are private firefighters taking jobs from this app called Embr. Basically your job is to rush into burning buildings, save lives, hopefully save all the lives, and also make money at the same time. It's our, satire at just the venture capitalism and kind of the cutback of public funding pushed to the extreme. So in this all reality, this is what could happen if the government cuts back, on public funding or public funded emergency services, when venture capital backed services or private services takes its place. This is what could happen. Gameplay wise, it's a pretty frantic, close quarter, co-op firefighting experience. It's basically shooter, except that obviously you're not shooting to kill. You're battling against this amorphous, procedurally and dynamically generated and propagating enemy. So the mechanic, you can think a little bit of Splatoon, a little bit of Overcooked, some obviously some FPS component as well. So that's the game in a nutshell.
So, the game has social commentary in it. Is that how you guys came up with the game idea? Was you were just seeing things on the news, or you're like, what if we just cut, what if the budget of things just got cut to the point where it just got to a ridiculous point where it's just random people? Or because the game has, from what I've seen, a very like comedic, almost kind of like how like Overcooked looked, or
Yeah,
just very like so it's like it has a very somewhat serious message, but it's done in a very comedic way. So like how did you guys come with that way of thinking of where it's like, all right, we want to say social commentary, but we don't want it to be too in your face, I guess is the way I'm.
yeah. I mean, that's exactly sort of the thought process, right? It's that we wanted to make it at least imbue with it a little bit of a statement of our time type of message, or just like this like a commentary of today's world or reality, trying to imbue a little bit of that message in the game, but not do it didactically and not do it so in your face to a point where people just like, oh, we're we're being beaten over the head with a message and whatnot. And so I think comedic, you're basically going with the comedic direction. It just like a pretty natural extension of that. And I think another thing that we want to avoid is to just make it too dark. So to the point, because I mean, the subject matter is kind of dark, right? I mean, if you really peel back the art, like what you're doing mechanically, um, it is kind of dark. So
Yeah.
I feel like if we just be straight and go for realism, then that's sort of it's almost like too. I mean, it could potentially just be dark.
Yeah,
Maybe kind of the gameplay, the fun factor would potentially be lost. So definitely try to strike that balance.
because you don't want it to be like, not saying that this is like a bad game or anything, but like how This Is the Police is, where it's a very like uh, dark police simulation game of like, this is the things that are going on, and it's like, well, we don't be that. Maybe a little lighthearted, and also saying like, hey, this is dumb. This
Yeah,
is
I mean, I
yeah.
think also like I think it's sort of I think it's kind of um, a way to for people to not to sort of misinterpret the message as well. Just because we were like concerned that if we make it realistic, it's almost like we're almost undermining the work of firefighters, and that's actually the opposite of what we're doing, right? So, we're saying that, hey, this is what would happen, what could happen if firefighting, takes like firefighting is performed by, people who are untrained, people who are not like professionals and whatnot, right? So, um, the like basically kind of the message or the inference is to also highlight the importance of real life firefighters and the job that they're doing. So I think if we go for realism and whatnot, that message could be lost or people might misconstrue. So yeah, it's also like a reason why we head in this direction. And besides, like, I think if the message gets lost with people, if people just want to have a laugh, that's still viable, totally still fine.
Yeah, because I actually have my I guess my brother-in-law, 'cause it's my sister's husband. Uh, he's a firefighter, so I was even thinking of sending him this, just being like, check this game out. Like, isn't it ridiculous? So from the last game you guys made, you guys did like Guns of Icarus, which I felt like was a very it's such a tonally different thing than what you guys made now. Like, what was the mindset going from something like Guns of Icarus to Embr? Were you guys just like thinking of just experimenting? You didn't want to just do the same thing twice, or what exactly were you guys thinking when you guys wanted to like kind of change shift and uh, like that?
um yeah, I think we're not really tied to a specific genre, or mechanics, or set of mechanics. I think we've always been, pretty open to exploring different themes, different mechanics, different art direction, and so on. So if you look at, all the games that we've done, anywhere from like Creevers, which is like, atmospheric, slower paced, platformer, bioluminescent forests with, cute creatures, to Guns, to Hamsterdam, which is a kung fu fighting hamster brawler on mobile and Switch, and now to Embr. I think we've sort of always taken that. We've always wanted to take that creative risk and try to explore different genre, and different mechanics. And the way we approach game making is also very mechanic driven. So we'll do a lot of gray box prototyping, and then basically try to figure out thematically, or maybe not to a lesser extent narratively, but definitely creatively and like artistically, where we want to take it. So it's, we've never really been set to a specific genre, or tied to a particular set of mechanics. Although now I would say with us, we just because of Guns, we obviously build up some knowledge base and know-how in making multiplayer games. So with Embr and with our upcoming projects, I think they will be more multiplayer centric. With Embr, it's obviously single player. It's a single player. It can be a single player game, but there's also obviously a co-op component as well. And I think going forward, like basically co-op, exploring more teamwork, building stuff that involves teamwork and multiplayer, and on the other side of the coin, like procedurally generated stuff, AI, like we'll continue to like do that broadly, but thematically we're not really tied to a specific thing.
Do you have any advice for someone that would want to make a game that has an online component? Because I know that it, like, making a single player game is one thing, but then going into multiplayer, I've heard, is just like a whole slew of issues that a lot of people don't realize they run into.
Yeah, multiplayer is definitely. So we've done, uh, basically, like dedicated server stuff. We, now Ember is a player hosted, a P2P networking with player hosted server type construct. Like we've built something very small scope to, guns, which is like pretty big scope, right? Multiplayer definitely just adds a whole another layer of complexity, well, maybe like multiple layers of complexity. And it's definitely harder. It's harder in like a number of different ways, not just technical, but in terms of balance, in terms of support as well. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely not something, especially um, if someone wants to like make it a release project, sell it for money. It's definitely not easy. So I think maybe perhaps if people are just starting out trying multiplayer games, maybe just keep in mind scope. Build something simple, build something playable, just to test it, on a smaller scale first. I mean, that's kind of how we started, right? Like with Flight, there was at one point a multiplayer component. Now it's Flight Icarus is kind of the single player prototype of guns. But like when we started, almost 10 years ago, it was like a 6 months small, really really small scope multiplayer. Basically a project with a multiplayer component. But even then, we ran into a lot of problems. So yeah, I mean, I think scope is probably maybe expectation, right? Like, just if someone's like building something like really huge and expecting, like a big release, whatever, then as their first project, then that's probably pretty ambitious. Not saying that that's not possible, but it definitely makes the task a lot harder.
Yeah, because I've read like there's a book that I was reading. It was Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, where the guy that made Stardew Valley, he didn't even want to touch the multiplayer component of it because he'd worked on the game for 5 years, and he's
Yeah.
like, I just don't even want to look at this game anymore. Which I don't even blame him. I recently started trying to do Unity tutorials. I was doing it like years ago, and I was like, well, there's nothing going on right now with quarantine as time of this video, quarantine and stuff. And I honestly have no idea how someone. It, the fact that you guys can even make games is crazy because I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is the most overwhelming thing I think I've ever done in my life. I think that a lot of people don't give game developers enough credit when it comes to making things because there's so much that goes into it that people just don't even realize. So if anything, I appreciate what you guys do because it can't be easy to like to even stay motivated. Like, how do you guys stay motivated to go? I want to make this game, even when everything is starting to just like not look like it's gonna happen. Like, how do you get it to where you're in that mindset of we're making this game?
I think this is a good question because at some point, during prototype or during gray box, we kind of have to take a leap of faith. I think with guns, we definitely do that, right? Like so when we first built guns, it was just like basically, like a like a rectangle, like it's like just cubes and spheres, right? Like, and then you're on a platform with a sphere, as a player character, and then you're just like shooting like pixels or just shooting like little like squares at a target, and that's kind of how we prototype turret shooting, right? And then you build like really really simple like multiplayer component. Someone else is on the platform, you like shoot at each other on turrets, what make believe turrets, and just like see if that was fun. And with Embr, it's just kind of like, yeah, it just we simulate fire with like just like really just with pixels, like with sprites and stuff. Like we it's just very very like there's really no art, right? Like you kind of simulate things, and then now you have a sphere that kind of walk through the space and put out fire a little bit, and then just like really rudimentary fire propagation logic and stuff like that. At some point, you play around, you have like people like other maybe friends or whatever play around, and you just kind of see if that has potential to grab someone's attention or interest, right? If even at that early stage, hopefully you get a glimpse of like where the game could be. Um, and you just kind of have to make a determination, like when it's time, when it's like, okay, fine, you have the resources, we have the bandwidth, you know, just kind of have to like make a term, like it's definitely a leap of faith, right? It's not like it's not different from like movies or from music or from any type of like media, creation or like creative process. You just kind of have to take the leap of faith and say, well, we kind of believe in this vision or believe in this project, or let's just go for it, with everything we know. And I mean, it doesn't always work out, right? But that's kind of the risk you take. Yeah, it's a huge risk because I mean, every game it's its own startup in a way. It's like, okay, fine, building a game studio, like being indie developers, like we are doing our own startups, but every game project it's also its own startup. So it's, yeah, very risky. It's very creatively rewarding, but very risky at the same time.
So do you feel like do you feel like the that it's gotten too big now to get into games, or do you feel like now it's like the best time to do it?
It's not a big or small question, I guess. It just, yeah, it's a struggle for everybody, right? Like, you know, there are obviously, awesome success indie stories, but by and large, most games, that even make it on Steam, they don't really see the light of day, and that just, it's a struggle. I mean, that's just kind of the reality of the marketplace right now. I think it's not really like the market is necessarily big or small or whatnot. It's more like the discoverability is just really hard, because, well, I mean, there are a lot of games, right? There are a lot of people making games, and the it's not necessarily a bad thing because there are a lot of really good games out there, but it just makes discoverability really really hard. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's just like I think people go out there and make games and thinking that, like, yeah, they're necessarily going to be like almost guaranteed some level of income. That's just not that's there.
It's kind of like YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yes. I mean, I think with all the media, like entertainment, creative industries, it's like this, right? Just because I think it is probably never been easier to create content and create good content. And so there was just a lot of content out there in general,
Yeah,
and it just makes it really hard.
yeah, yeah. Because yeah, it seems like you know everyone's like, oh, well, I'll make this magnum opus game, and it's like, well, there are even some fantastic games that never sold well, and you'll find them in like almost like bargain bin bundles and stuff because it's like, well, they got to recoup the cost somehow. I've had friends who would be like, we should make a podcast. Oh, it'd be so like, let's make a let's play channel, all this stuff. And they wanted me to do everything. Like I had a friend who was like, well, dude, when you learn how to use Unity, which I was like, dude, it's going to take like years before I can actually comprehend what I'm doing. It's like, oh, well, I got to make my game. Like, you can make it yourself. Like, I'm not making your game.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
so I guess the last thing, because I know that you have a meeting to go to in like a few minutes.
Haha.
The the final thing that I wanted to ask is, like, why game development? Like, what about game development do you enjoy doing? Because I mean, you've been doing it now for a while, so like,
Yeah.
why why game development, and what does it mean to you to do game development?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? I think there may be really only a few media or you know industries or professions, if we can call it that, where the creative and just like your creative vision, whatever is like crazy ideas that you have in your mind, like fuses with the I would just say like pretty cutting edge technical, um, just like technology, right? And then to create something that like people have never seen before. Um, that is super exciting, right? Like I think money aside, like it's hard to make money making game. People do, but it's really hard. But that aside, I think creatively and just like, sort of technologically, it's really, really satisfying and really exciting. Just because, like, oh yeah, we get to use like procedural generation, we get to use AI, we get to like play around with like all that stuff. A lot of really new visualization stuff, right? And then that with a creative idea that you know people hopefully haven't quite seen before, and you fuse everything into like a product, I guess, or like a final like package, and people have fun, hopefully, and people get to play, or like kind of enjoy the work that we do. So there's like a lot of like just it's a kind of a passion industry, right? What's like a passion career or passion profession? Like, there's a lot of love that goes into it. Like with what we make, it's kind of a piece of us that goes into the game, right? There's a lot of like, us, our personality, like what we like, our dreams or our vision or whatever that goes into like what we make. So I think that is immensely gratifying, right? Like I don't know if I used to, work in marketing, or, do like product management and stuff for different startups and whatnot. And it's interesting as well, but you don't get this kind of, right, this kind of like satisfaction, or this kind of like, um, this kind of love that goes into the work, I guess. And so like, I think there, I definitely like treasure the moments that you know we that well, the opportunity that I have to do this, because there is really isn't like that many other professions that could allow us to do like something like this. So it's cool. I mean, it's just super stressful though.
Yeah, I bet. Absolutely. So I guess now, if you guys wanted to check out the game's called Embr. I'll put a link in the description below. You guys can check it out on Steam, and it's also on Google Stadia. So if you have Stadia, you can also check it out on there. And the game's currently in early access, and it is going for how much? $20.
Yeah,
$20.
1999.
1999.
Yeah.
So if you guys want to check out the game, you can go on there. And then, do you have social media stuff that you wanted to put into?
Yeah. So the all the social media are at Ember Game.
Cool. Okay. So if you guys want to follow them too, I will put a link in the description as well. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, every sub helps. Every like helps as well. I don't really know what it helps with, but it helps me, I guess, somewhere. So thank you, anybody who out there is watching. I know this channel can be a little hard to find with, as we were talking about games, there's just a sea of gaming related channels. Like, where are you going to find this one? So if you found this channel, I appreciate you finding it. And if you stuck around, I also appreciate that too. So Howard, thank you so much for coming onto the show. And everyone check out Embr.
Oh no, thanks for having me. It was fun.